And then my blade. I carry a blade every single day, pretty much no matter where I go, unless there's something I need to go through or I'm getting screened. A blade is one of those weapons as well that kind of throughout history, warriors have always used a blade. I mean, we can trace that back as far as we can possibly even look. Guys have used a blade for hunting, for crafts, for skills, for defense. So there's a lot of history behind why we carry a blade. So for me, it's a non-negotiable thing. And, when you have a band of brothers like we do, it's one of those items where it's like, hey, don't get caught without your blade. There's a penalty for that, type of thing. So it's not just an object that I could use, but it's also a way of life. So it's thinking about this a little bit more deeply and respecting it for what it is. In the Philippine martial arts with Kali, they talk about how, if they unsheathe their weapon, they have to use it. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but if they take their blade out, they got to put it to use. So it's one of those connections where it's like, okay, if I pull this thing out, what am I doing with it? So this is the Razorback blade that we make. I did the Razorback, the name, in honor of Adam Brown. The red and black handle was because the Razorbacks have the red and black logo. And a little bit of tribute to him there, just because Adam made a huge impact on my life. So much to talk about. We could talk a full day about Adam, but just a beautiful tribute to him. It's the compact version of what we carry. I like traveling with that. It's a little bit more adaptable depending on what I'm wearing. And then it's in our IWB sheath. And of course, this is what I do for, my life. And, I'm so passionate about the gear, so I don't want to geek out too much.
Can I see that?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to pass it the right way. Oh. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, I purchased one of these a long time ago, and I love this blade. I don't use it. It's sentimental to me because we know each other, and so it's going to be framed, hanging in there. But there it is. This is awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'm curious. When did you start carrying a blade?
They were important to me even when I was younger, carrying a blade. I always recognized as significant, whether you say that it was in my time as Boy Scout or, the progression through me reading stuff about like Tom Brown and survival, you realize really quickly, like that's an important tool. And I think that for me, it started to become a part of my lifestyle from a fixed blade perspective when I really started fighting at the command. And I started to realize like, oh, this is something that I should have every day. I know how to use it. Now let me live this lifestyle. And I think that grows on you when you start realizing like, oh, I actually know how to apply this. So it's a real weapon. Somebody that doesn't know the application of it can kind of feel sort of awkward with the relationship of a blade. Like in some cases, it's more scary to them than it is helpful. So I think that there was a transition there between my military career of actually owning that as part of my life.
Is that when you really started to learn how to use a fixed blade? Is when you're over at Dev Group, or?
Yeah, there was obviously some brief overviews in the teams, and I took to that and I kind of understood it, but not really from a concealed perspective of really implementing it like we did. When we started working with SEOC and those guys, like my eyes were opened in the sense of like, oh, I know how to be violent and I know how to be effective, but now you put the blade in my hand, and now both sides of the offensive and the defensive I can understand. And it kind of took it to another level. So there's a lot of guys in that organization that I always give a tribute to because of how well they do their craft and how serious they take it. That kind of came on us, and what do? We always go find the best in the world. And, whether you look for them or they end up there, it's like a magnet. Right? Because everybody that's really good at what they do ends up being in that nucleus, that spot that you end up there because you're great at what you do. And so I think that was the eye-opening moment for me working with those guys and seeing how they move. And I think that's also what transcended in our courses is that people like, I never realized you had to move like that when they watch us or they watch us do the demos or we do something live. They start to, realize like, oh, that's what it takes to actually defend yourself. It's like, yes, even if it's just permission in your mind to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I never got the opportunity when I was in to learn how to properly use a blade. So Please excuse my ignorance with passing it back to you there, but
It's all good. There's a deep part of that, right? Like that's just a warrior way of passing it. It's kind of, if you ever look at somebody that doesn't know how to handle a blade, there's always this awkward, like, how do I pass it type thing. And when you start to develop those skills and that surety, I mean, you can pass a blade like that without even looking. So it becomes very, very effective, not only for just showing somebody a blade, but also in fight access, like actually doing that in a dynamic situation. And the cool thing is I do that with my whole family, like every one of my kids, even Joseph. Joseph at 2 already knows that that's how you pass a blade.
No
So it's
way.
ingrained in him. Yeah, if you say pass, he'll just say, he calls them big sharps. Like, so he loves big sharps. He's like, got the big sharp factory over there, but he's been helping me out. And I'll pass him. He's like, all right, pass. And he'll put his hand out. Boom, he'll pass it. And he'll give it to you right back the same way.
Oh,
so it's kind of
man, that's-
ingraining that motor memory now,
Okay, so when do you start? That's incredible. 2 years old?
Yeah.
When did you start teaching your kids about firearms and blades?
That right there is a really good question. And obviously, firearms are something that's extremely important to our lifestyle. And they're abundant in the world, right? It's something that we need to recognize and kind of confront as a reality. It's not something that we wish it was, but it is actually here. They exist. You're probably going to run into one at some point in your life. So taking responsibility for that. So when I really look at the development of understanding and the respect of firearms, for me, it has to be an intuitive process because it's not as simple as like, oh, right when you're 2, it's just black and white that you're going to be able to learn about them.
Yeah.
So it's non-negotiable to learn about them because I remember some of the situations I went in when I was a kid. But my trigger for my children at each different stage that they're at is to identify, do they know the difference between a real gun and a toy gun? And really auditing that process. Like, do they actually know? Does that Nerf gun feel and look and act like the real gun that I'm showing you? And what's the difference? They need to be able to articulate it. They need to be able to understand it. They need to be able to say that. Guns are a tool. They can kill, take, and save lives. So the seriousness of that has to be understood. So they already start knowing the methodologies, like the 5 safety rules. Awareness, always treat your gun like it's loaded. Never point your gun at anything you don't want to kill or destroy. Never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. And always know your target, what's behind it, and all around it. So those are ingrained into them all, right? Every one of them knows that. I think Aurora is probably working on the last couple, but Leo's got them down to a T. So recognizing that they understand those, now it's identifying, well, what does awareness to you mean to you, buddy? Like, how are you actually understanding what that means? He's like, well, I know I have to pay attention. I know I have to look around my environment. I know I have to think about, well, who's in the next room over? Who's downstairs right now? Is there anybody above us? No. Okay. We have a clear roof. So if he can articulate that, now awareness starts to become a thing. And also from that very early age, I'm like, don't put your finger on the trigger when you're running around aimlessly if you're not putting your gun up. Don't sweep your little brother. It's always the younger ones because there's an intentionality to it. Like, you want to protect your brother, right? Yes, that's Joseph. He's 2. Don't sweep your brother. Got it. Now, all of them are not sweeping each other. So there's already this methodology and mindset that's already being ingrained into them. So
What age, how young do they touch a firearm in your family? Is it different for all of them?
Leo started shooting already.
How old is Leo?
So Leo's 7. I would say where a real live firearm, and again, we can play games with that too, as far as like calibers and all that. But I think at the point of which the youngest has really held a real firearm is probably around 4 or 5.
Okay.
Because they at least have the understanding that can hurt you. That's the difference. Like there's a differentiator there. And so they can contrast that. Now, when I go to shoot, what are you choosing? I'm not just going to go put a 12 gauge in my 5-year-old's hand. We're going to probably start with a 22. But then you also have to understand, what's the gain out of that? Am I gaining anything by taking my 5-year-old to go shoot a 5.56 or a 9mm round? And I'm going to tell you that no, you're not really gaining much at all. I think that starting them earlier on and making sure their proficiency is dialed in, airsoft, pellet, BB, paintball, pick one. right? Pick one that you can utilize in a safer environment and really get them to understand. And then everybody's got to be that coach and that judge to say, all right, this is my child. I know they understand it. They're actually digesting this knowledge and they can apply it, which is the most important part, safely. Now we can move to a higher caliber. I think that's an intuition that you have to have as a firearms instructor or even a parent. It's a parent's responsibility to really take that seriously too.
Yeah. I have a 2-year-old and a newborn now, and I never really thought about. Oh, thank you. I never really thought about until very recently how I'm going to introduce firearms into my kids, and so it's tricky. In today's world, it's getting more and more dangerous, more and more home break-ins. I didn't used to have a weapon in every room. Now I do. Okay. So one thing I've done is I have, even in my daughter's nursery, there will be a firearm hanging. I'll probably get, it will be probably one of those little Tiffany blue pistols. And in my son's room, I have a old antique Winchester 357 lever action, and that they can't reach. But I just want them to get used to seeing it. And with my 2-year-old now, when he sees a gun, I don't think he even knows what this means, but he'll point at the gun, say gun, and then he'll say very, very dangerous. Yep. And I just want him to get used to being around it, so it's not like this big thing. The first time he sees one, he sees me shoot in our backyard, and yeah. But I'm always curious, with gents like you, how you introduce it into your family, because I think it's extremely important, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I see people taking their 4-year-old out to shoot an AR or a deer rifle, or a 12 gauge, and it's like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. There's a certain level of intelligence we have to apply to it too, and the safety of our home is really important, and that's another reason, right? Like, I want my son. He's 14. I know my 14-year-old can pick up a rifle right now, pick up a pistol. He's good, but the younger ones too, it became apparent to me, like, I need to keep these firearms safe. And that's something I encourage everybody to do, to make sure that they're safe, because an extra 5 seconds to open the safe up, to me, that barrier of the unknown when I'm not home for whatever reason, curiosity or any of those other things, it's really important to create that barrier. I don't think that I see a point now in which I wouldn't have that, just because it's a peace of mind knowing that there's a level of separation between them and the firearm. So something to consider, for your own home.